This is a copy of the speech given by the late Vince Lombardi on June 22, 1970 in Dayton, Ohio. It was to be his last speech. A week later, he entered a Washington hospital suffering with terminal cancer, which claimed his life on September 3, 1970. I'm Ed Gebhardt. Mr. Lombardi and Phil Marion were teammates at Fordham University in the 1930s. Mr. Lombardi went on to great fame as coach of the world champion Green Bay Packers, while Mr. Marion returned to coach football in his native Delaware County. Throughout the years, Mr. Lombardi and Mr. Marion, the former Fordham teammates, retained a close personal relationship. Today, the words of Mr. Lombardi's last speech are particularly appropriate as a memorial to Phil Marion, who, like Vince Lombardi, dedicated his life to the pursuit of excellence. This is Mr. Lombardi's last speech. I want to talk a little bit today about attaining a goal, a success, what I think it is. I want to say first that I think you've got to pay a price for anything that's worthwhile, and success is paying the price. You've got to pay a price to win, you've got to pay a price to stay on top, and you've got to pay a price to get there. Success is not a sometime thing, it is an all-the-time thing. In other words, you don't do what is right just once in a while, but all the time. Success is a habit, just like winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. So it has been the American zeal, gentlemen, to be first in everything that we do, and to win, and to win, and to win. Today we have a new ideology. The only line that some of our people seem to want today is a line between passing and failing. There is no hunt for excellence. And you and I both know that this is the easy way. The prevailing idea today is to take the easy way, that effort and work are unnecessary. You know, being a part of a football team is no different than being a part of any other organization. Being part of an army, being a part of a political party, the objective is to win. The objective is to beat the other guy. Some may think this is a little bit hard and a little bit cruel. I don't think so. I do think that it is a reality of life. I do think that men are competitive, and the more competitive the business, the more competitive the men. They know the rules when they get into the game, they know the objective when they get into the game, and the objective is to win, fairly, squarely, decently, win by the rules, but still win. In truth, gentlemen, I've never really known a successful man who deep in his heart did not appreciate the discipline that it takes to win. There is something in great men that needs a discipline, that really yearns for and needs a head-to-head combat. I believe that man's greatest hour, in fact, his greatest fulfillment, his finest fulfillment, is that moment when he has worked his heart out for a good cause and lies exhausted but victorious on the field of battle. Wherever that field of battle may be, in your business, in my business, or wherever. Success in life is a matter not so much of talent and not so much of opportunity, but rather of concentration and perseverance. The man who succeeds above his fellow man is the man who early in life clearly decides his objective, and towards that objective he directs all of his powers. I have picked up a reputation for being tough or for being hard, and I admit I have some mixed emotions about that reputation, particularly when one of my former worked with Vince Lombardi, and his answer was, "Well, I'll tell you in a nutshell. When Lombardi turns to us in the locker room and tells us to sit down, I don't even look for a chair." And another one was asked, "How does Vince Lombardi treat you?" He said, "He treats us all the same, like dogs." I would say there are occasions when being hard and being tough immediately is the easiest way and the kindest way really in the long run. We have to be hard sometimes to get the most out of people. We have to be tough sometimes to get the most out of ourselves. And what can sometimes appear to be cruel at a particular moment can eventually turn out to be a blessing in the long run for the man himself and for the entire organization. And I can say in my business, we have so many examples of that. For example, we have new boys who come in. We call them rookies. And the sooner we can relate to them that this is not their business, the better off they are in the long run, because now they can direct all of their power to some other field. And the same thing with others, the veterans. It is particularly tough with a veteran who has given 10 or 9 or 11 years of his life, and he's played some real good football for you personally and for the team. But the day must come when you have to tell him, if he doesn't realize it himself, that he no longer can do the job. That's tough, but in the long run, it is the kindest thing that can happen to either one of these particular people. I believe in what Robert Browning said, that the reach should always exceed the grasp. I've heard 2 responses given to that particular quotation about a man who was always reaching for the moon. The first, that even if you don't always reach the moon, you will perhaps grab a star or 2. And the other answer is that the man who keeps reaching for the moon will sooner or later strain himself. I tend to believe in catching stars. And I don't think you can ever look back on a year of success and say, we can coast during the year ahead. We can't coast because there is always going to be someone else moving into higher gear and reaching for the moon, and as a result, grasping a star and passing us. Competition is a force to be reckoned with in football as well as in business. I've been in football all of my life, gentlemen, and I don't know whether I'm qualified to be a part of anything else except football, except that I consider it a great game, a game of many assets, and I think a symbol of what this country's best attributes are: courage and stamina, and a coordinated efficiency or teamwork. And I think it is a Spartan game in that it requires Spartan qualities to play it, be a part of it. The Spartan qualities of sacrifice and self-denial, rather than the late Spartan quality of leaving the weak to die. I won't say that every football player makes a sacrifice, a real sacrifice, or that every football player will deny himself. There are too many examples of those who do not. But as a group, as a whole, it does require sacrifice, and it does require self-denial. It's a game of violent contact, and yet because of that violent contact, it demands a personal discipline which is seldom found any other place in this modern world. And gentlemen, these are the qualities that are necessary for success: courage and stamina, and a coordinated efficiency or teamwork. It is a game of quick decisions and strategy. It's a game which requires proper psychological and emotional attitudes in order to win. More important, each man must contribute to the spirit, and this spirit is really the cohesive force that binds 11 hardened and talented men. Just as each of you must contribute to the spirit of your company, to the spirit of your associates. And each Sunday, after the battle, your team savors its victory. The other lives in the bitterness of defeat. And many hurts are a small price to pay for having won. And to the loser, there is no reason which is adequate enough. To the winner, there is 100% elation, 100% fun, 100% laughter. And yet the only thing left to the loser is resolution and determination. Most important of all, to be successful in life demands that each man make a personal commitment to excellence and to victory, even though we know deep down that the ultimate victory can never be completely won. Yet that victory must be pursued, and it must be wooed with every fiber of our body, with every bit of our might and all of our effort. And each week there is a new encounter. Each day there is a new challenge. And yet all of the display and all of the color and all of the glamour and all of the excitement and all of the championship rings and all of the rewards and all of the money, these things are only limited in the memory. But the spirit, the will to win, the will to excel, these are the things that will endure, and really, these are the qualities, larger and more important than any of the events they occasion. Let me just get away from that for a moment. Right now, in a large sense, I think we're engaged in a struggle which is far more fiercely contested than anything. And it's a struggle for the hearts, and it's a struggle for the souls and minds of all of us. And it's a game in which there are no spectators, only players. And it's a struggle which is going to test all of our courage and all of our stamina and all of our teamwork. At the same time, I want to say that I think we live in an age for heroes. At no other time in our history have the prizes and the perils at one and the same time been so great. But I think we have to decide whether we want to provide a full life for humanity or destroy ourselves with our own problems. And the test is going to be whether man mistakes the growth of wealth and power with the growth of spirit and character, or, like some infant who is playing with matches, destroys the very house he may have inherited. You know, right now, one of the great topics in the country is American freedom, and I think we sometimes confuse it with license. There is a great difference. I think before we can embrace freedom, we first have to embrace those things which underline freedom, and they are duty, respect for authority, and a development of a mental discipline. I'm sure you're shocked, like everyone else, with what seems to be complete breakdown of law and order and a complete breakdown of our moral code. It is almost beyond belief. I'd like to read you something. I won't tell you where this came from until I'm through. It says, and I quote, "Corrupt the young people. Get them interested in sex. Make them superficial and destroy their ruggedness. Get people's minds off their government by focusing their attention on sex, plays, and immoral movies. Divide the people into hostile groups. Destroy the people's faith in their natural leaders by holding the latter up to contempt and ridicule. Preach true democracy, but seize power as fast and as ruthlessly as possible. Encourage them in extravagance. Produce fear of inflation with rising prices and general discontent. Incite unnecessary strikes in vital industries. Encourage civil disorders and force a lenient and soft attitude on the part of government toward disorders. Cause a breakdown of the overall virtues of honesty, sobriety, self-respect, faith in the pledged word, and ruggedness. Now, that's not something I extracted last week from the Washington Post or from the New York Times. This was printed in 1919 at Dusseldorf, Germany, and is the Communist Rules of Revolution. It was 50 years ago, but it is of widespread concern today. So I think we need a rebirth, gentlemen, of courage and stamina and coordinated efficiency. We need a rebirth of perseverance and determination. We need a rebirth of discipline. We need a control. We need a restraint. I'm not talking about repression. There is a great deal of difference between the right to dissent and the right to destroy. One is articulation, and the other is anarchy. So I believe that it becomes our obligation to pursue excellence and to pursue victory and to develop much more of a strong spirit of competitive interest and preserve what has always been our American zeal, and that is to be first and to win. None of us is born equal in spite of everything they say about it. We are born only in certain inalienable rights, but we are born rather unequal. However, I want to say that the talented are no more responsible for their birthright than the underprivileged are, and the measurement of each man should be what each does. And I want to say that it is becoming increasingly difficult to be tolerant of a society which has sympathy only for the misfit, only for the maladjusted, only for the criminal, and only for the loser. I think we should have sympathy for them, certainly. I think we should help them, certainly. But I think it is also the time in this country to cheer for, to stand up for, to slap on the back the doer, the achiever, a man who recognizes a problem and does something about it, the winner. The most important element in the character makeup of a man who is successful is that of mental toughness, and I might say the most difficult one to explain, because mental toughness is so many things. For example, it is humility. Simplicity is a form of humility, and simplicity is a sign of true greatness. Meekness is a sign of humility, and meekness is a sign of true strength. Mental toughness is Spartanism with its qualities of sacrifice and self-denial, also the qualities of dedication and fearlessness and love. Not the love that you have for your wife or your wife may have for you. The love I am speaking of is loyalty, which is the greatest of loves, teamwork, which is a form of love, and the love that one man has for another is respecting the dignity of another man. Mental toughness is also the perfectly disciplined will, and the will, gentlemen, is the character in action. The great hope of society has to be the character in action, and we are never going to create a good society, much less a great one, until we once more recognize and respect individual excellence. Let me say this in closing. When all is said and done, to be successful, a man must exert an effective influence upon his brothers and upon his associates, and the degree to which he accomplishes this depends upon the personality of the man, the incandescence of which he is capable, the flame of the fire that burns inside him, the magnetism which draws the hearts of other men to him. No man, no matter how great he may be, can long continue to be successful unless he wins the battles, because the battles decide all. I think it is essential to understand that conquests are won primarily in the hearts of men, and once you have won their hearts, they'll follow you anywhere. The difference between a successful man and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather in lack of will, because the character, rather than education, is man's greatest need and man's greatest safeguard, because the character is higher than the intellect. The difference between men is in energy, in the strong will, in a singleness of purpose, and an invincible determination. But the great difference is in sacrifice, in self-denial, in love and loyalty, in fearlessness and in humility, in the pursuit of excellence and in the perfectly disciplined will. Because this is not only the difference between men, this is the difference between great and little men.